California gas hit $7. And honestly, that might be the least of your problems. Not because $7 isn't real. It is. But because the moment your brain locked onto that number, it stopped looking for the other four. Think about what happens a few months from now. Your grocery bill, your flight for summer vacation, even your loan interest. What do you think is going to happen to all of those? And here's the real question. Is the gas price even close to being the worst of it? It's not. Not even close. By the end of this video, you'll know every wave that's coming, the timeline it's on, and what you can do before it reaches you. Most people will find out when it's too late. Subscribe if you don't want to be one of them. Now, let's get into it. Chapter 1. The number you're watching is the wrong one. Here's where most people's mental model of an oil shock breaks down. They think of oil the way they think of gas. You need it, you buy it. The price is what it is. That's not wrong. It's just radically incomplete. Oil is not a fuel. It is the substrate underneath every physical thing that moves in this economy. Roughly 96% of all goods transported in the United States depend on diesel at some point in the supply chain. The produce in your refrigerator, the package on your doorstep, the components inside the product that got assembled somewhere before it arrived, the heating system in the warehouse where that product sat before it shipped. When you remove pressure from that substrate because a conflict has disrupted supply from one of the most consequential producing regions on the planet, the result is not a single price increase that you feel once and then it's over. It is a cascade. Sequential. Staggered. Arriving on different timelines. And here's the part that matters most. Wave 1 is designed to be visible. The gas station price is the most legible number in the American consumer's daily life. It is posted at the curb. It is updated in real time. It leads every news segment that touches energy. It is the first thing your brain locks onto when an oil shock begins. And that is exactly the problem. Because the moment your brain anchors to that number, it starts using it as the reference point for everything that follows. Gas goes up a little more, you register escalation. Gas pulls back a few cents. You feel relief. Your entire read on the situation is being calibrated to one signal. While that calibration is running, the other four waves are already moving on a completely different clock. This is not a quirk. This is not bad luck. This is the structure of how a commodity shock actually travels through an integrated economy. And the people who understand that structure best are not the ones watching the number at the curb. Chapter 2. The waves that have already hit you. Let's talk about what's already in motion. Wave 2, your grocery bill. Diesel prices rose approximately 36% in the weeks following the conflict escalation. That number directly affects refrigerated trucking. The vehicles moving produce, dairy, meat, and prepared food from distribution hubs to regional retailers. Here's how the supply chain absorbs this. Trucking operators have contracts. They have fuel hedges. They have short-term buffers built into their cost structure. So initially they absorb the increase. The price you see at the store doesn't move immediately. Then the contracts expire. The hedges run out. At that point, the operator passes the cost up the chain. The retailer absorbs it for another cycle. Then the retailer passes it to you. By the time that number shows up on your shelf tag, it has traveled through 4 or 5 layers of compressed margin. The decision to raise it was made weeks before you noticed. Here's where things get strange. The timing is almost perfectly designed to confuse you. By the time your grocery bill starts climbing, gas prices may have already started to recover. The news cycle will say oil is stabilizing, and you will feel as if the worst is behind you. Your grocery receipt will say something different. The signals are out of sequence. If you are reading the gas station as the indicator for everything else, you will consistently misread where you actually are in this timeline. Wave 4, the flight you haven't booked yet. Jet fuel prices rose approximately 85% following the conflict. That is not a small number. For most major carriers, fuel is the single largest operating cost, representing 20 to 30% of total expenses. Airlines did not wait. They never do. Revenue management systems in the airline industry are among the fastest repricing mechanisms in the consumer economy. By the time most travelers registered what was happening geopolitically, the summer schedule had already been recalculated. If you booked summer travel in February or March, before the conflict escalated, you may be holding a pre-shock price. If you haven't booked yet, you are entering a market that has already moved without you. And here is what makes Wave 4 structurally different from the grocery bill. Airline prices go up fast and come down slow. That asymmetry is not accidental. Revenue management models are built to protect margin, not to pass savings back to travelers in real time. There is no display at the curb. There is no daily number you can watch. By the time you check, the decision has already been made. Chapter 3. The waves that haven't hit yet. These are the serious ones. Everything in Chapter 2 is already in motion. You can feel it now, or you will feel it soon. What I'm about to tell you is different. These are the waves that haven't arrived yet. And this is where it gets genuinely serious. Wave 3. The one that's being decided right now, in fields you will never see. Let me explain something that doesn't make the news. Fertilizer is not made from crops. It is made from fossil fuels. Natural gas accounts for up to 80% of the production cost of nitrogen-based fertilizers, which are the most widely used category in commercial agriculture. The world's largest fertilizer-producing regions are Iran, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Those are not random countries. Those are the precise geography of the current conflict zone. And the shipping route that connects fertilizer production to the rest of the world runs through the Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately one-third of global fertilizer supply passes. Here is what that means in practical terms. Right now, in April and May, farmers are making planting decisions. How many acres to plant which crops? How much input cost they can absorb? Those decisions are being made against a fertilizer cost structure that looks dramatically different from what it looked like at the start of the year. The food you will buy in September and October was planted in the decisions being made this month. The price of growing it was set by the price of energy this week. Wave 3 does not arrive at your checkout line in April. It arrives at harvest, and by the time it does, most people will have completely stopped connecting it to the gas station where this whole story started. That is not an accident. That is the structure. Wave 5. This one is the most serious of all, and it's the quietest. Heading into 2026, the Federal Reserve was expected to cut interest rates. Not once, possibly twice. The Fed's own December projections had penciled in 2 cuts for the year. Markets were pricing in at least one, with June as the most likely starting point. That expectation had already been absorbed into decisions that real people were making. Mortgage calculations, car loan timelines, business credit assumptions, home purchase decisions, refinancing plans. A significant number of financial decisions made in late 2025 and early 2026 were built on one specific premise that borrowing was about to get cheaper. Then the conflict started in March, and an oil shock followed immediately. Oil price shocks are one of the most direct mechanisms connecting a geopolitical event to domestic inflation. Energy is an input to nearly every category in the consumer price index. When energy rises sharply, inflation pressure comes with it. And when inflation is moving up, the Fed does not cut. It holds. The rate cuts that people planned around are now essentially gone. Markets are now pricing in 0 cuts for the rest of 2026. Some economists who expected movement by June have pushed their timelines to 2027 at the earliest. Here's what makes Wave 5 different from everything else on this list. Waves 2, 3, and 4 are new costs, prices that went up and hit you. Wave 5 is not a new cost. It is the absence of the relief that was already priced into your plans. If you were waiting for rates to come down before refinancing, that window may not open on the schedule you were counting on. If you were waiting for cheaper borrowing before expanding, before purchasing, before making a move, the calculation you built that plan on has changed underneath you. There are 48 million people employed by middle-market businesses in this country. That category of company is the most sensitive to borrowing costs of any in the economy. And for all of them, a closed window has a specific name. The refinancing wall. Wave 5 is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. There's no number at the curb. It just means the thing you were waiting for isn't coming when you thought it was. Chapter 4. Your brain was never going to see this coming. Here's why. There is a name in behavioral economics for what happens when your brain encounters a large, visible, unavoidable number. Anchoring. The first significant piece of information you receive becomes the reference point for every judgment that follows. Everything after it gets measured against that anchor. Adjustments from the anchor are typically insufficient, which means you systematically underestimate how far things have moved from where the anchor was set. The $7 gas price is a perfect anchor. It is large. It is visible. It is updated in real time. It leads the news. It is the number your brain uses to build its model of the crisis. And once that model is running, here's what happens to the other 4 waves. The grocery bill goes up. Your brain does not file it under oil Cascade Wave 2 arriving on schedule. It files it under general inflation, unrelated, annoying. The connection to the anchor is broken. The fertilizer story doesn't reach you at all, because there is no consumer-facing number for fertilizer input costs. Nothing to anchor to, nothing to react to. The airline repricing happened before you checked. When you check now, you experience sticker shock. But you file it under summer travel is expensive. Not Wave 4, fuel costs repriced into the schedule you're now entering. The Fed holds rates. You read that as stability. Not the relief you built your plan on just got pushed back by an oil shock. 5 separate categories. 5 separate brain compartments. None of them labeled oil. That is anchoring doing exactly what it was designed to do. But in a globally integrated economy, with commodity futures markets, staggered supply chain transmission, geopolitical feedback loops, and financial instruments built specifically to separate visible price signals from underlying risk. The most visible signal is frequently the least informative one. And the people who design those instruments, those markets, those monetary policy frameworks, they understand anchoring better than most behavioral economists. The most legible number in an oil shock is the gas station price. That number is updated in real time. It leads the news. It sets the public's reference point for the entire event. While the public is anchored to that number, the other four waves move quietly through different systems on different timelines. I'm not saying that was planned. I'm saying it doesn't need to have been planned to function exactly as if it were. Chapter 5, Reading the Cascade. What to do before each window closes. Now that you can see all 5 waves and the order in which they arrive, here's a concrete way to use that. Not financial advice, not a prediction, just the specific decisions that look different when you're reading 5 waves instead of 1. Things worth pausing right now. If you have summer travel that isn't locked in yet, and the dates are flexible, there is an argument for waiting. Wave 4 has repriced the summer schedule, but peak pricing tends to cluster around specific windows. If your dates have any flexibility, watching how the fuel situation develops over the next few weeks before committing is a reasonable position. If you are considering large purchases that involve shipping or delivery, appliances, furniture, anything that moves through a supply chain, Wave 2 has not fully transmitted yet. The logistics cost increases have not completely reached retail pricing. Waiting 2 to 4 weeks before pulling the trigger means you're making that decision with more of the picture visible. If you are holding a variable rate credit product and considering adding to it, this is a specific moment to pause. Wave 5 has closed the window on cheap borrowing. Variable rate exposure right now is exposure to a rate environment that has moved against the original thesis. Things worth moving up the timeline on. If you have been thinking about refinancing into a fixed rate and were waiting for rates to come down first, the premise of that plan has changed. The window you were waiting for is not confirmed to open on the schedule you assumed. Getting a current quote now, not in 3 months, means you are deciding based on the actual environment, not the one you were expecting. If you have staples in your regular shopping that can be bought in bulk and stored, buying them now puts you ahead of Wave 3. September and October food pricing is being set by planting decisions happening this month. Non-perishables, dry goods, frozen items, anything you would buy anyway. The timing argument for buying some of that now is real. If you're a small business owner or run operations that depend on credit lines, reviewing those terms and initiating any renewal conversations now rather than later is a specific action that Wave 5 supports. When borrowing conditions tighten, the negotiating position for renewal deteriorates. Moving that conversation earlier puts you in a stronger position. The signal map. What to watch for and what it means when you see it. This is the part that most people don't do. Deciding in advance how to read a news event before it happens. If you see a headline saying the Fed held rates unchanged, that is not stability. That is Wave 5 active. The window is not reopened. If you see grocery prices rising while gas is flat or declining, that is Wave 2 in transmission, not separate inflation. The cascade on a delayed clock. If you see airlines announcing fuel surcharges or adjusting summer load factors, that is Wave 4 at peak. The repricing cycle is in its final stage. If you see reporting on tightening credit conditions for small and mid-sized businesses, that is Wave 5 reaching the real economy. The refinancing wall is making contact. These headlines will appear to be unrelated stories. Grocery prices over here, Fed decision over there, airline fees somewhere else. Now you have a framework that connects them. They are not separate stories. They are the same wave structure, arriving in sequence, reported as if they have nothing to do with each other. The difference between watching the news and reading the cascade is whether you can see the sequence underneath the stories. The second why. Here's what you came in knowing. Gas prices went up. California hit $7 in some areas after the conflict with Iran started. It felt bad, expensive, and frustrating. Here's what you are leaving with. That 7 is Wave 1. It is the most visible signal and the least complete one. Wave 2, your grocery bill, is already in the supply chain on a delayed clock. Wave 3, the fertilizer story, is being decided in planting decisions happening this month and will arrive at your checkout in the fall. Wave 4, your summer flights, have already been repriced around you. Wave 5, the borrowing environment you were counting on, did not open the way the plan assumed. The structure is not hidden. The waves are real. The timelines are documented. What was hidden was the sequence, how the most visible signal functions as an anchor, while the others move on different clocks, and why a system where the least informative signal is also the most legible one does not need to be a conspiracy to function exactly like one. Now you see the sequence. The question I'm sitting with, and the one I think you should be sitting with too, is this. Was 2008 a 5-wave event? Did the entire world spend 3 years calling it a mortgage crisis, while 4 other waves moved through the system on different timelines? That is what I'm going after next. That's 2 whys I'm pursuing. The next cascade is already forming. Subscribe, and you'll know what it is before it shows up on the news. If this changed how you see it, share it with your friends. And drop one thought that shifted for you in the comments.